So I want to thank Christy for her submission and for participating, and I want to thank Penelope. It's one thing to write the poem, it's another thing to take that poem and try to adapt it to a piece of music. And every year, for many, many years now, Penelope has just been doing a fantastic job. And I look at it this way, yes. When you take the time to share your creativity and submit those poems, it's as if you're giving a yes vote to our creative arts department. It's as if you're giving a yes to the universe and saying, I'm willing to let my creativity shine, and to then see it work so beautifully. I just am in awe continuously of what you create for us as a community. Thank you so much. And thank you, Christy. So I'm aware that there is a distinction between change and transformation. Change is like clothes. If you're like me and you're in a hurry, I run home and I change my clothes and I just drop them. And then I come back and I put them back on again in hopes that the next people that I meet didn't see me in those clothes before. And so change in that regard means that I can change something, but it's temporary because I can revert back. Right? I can adopt the same old habit that I thought that I've changed. Transformation's different. Transformation is the cocoon that once it turns into the butterfly doesn't get to go back. There's a significant difference in that. And you can even think about that in relation to surface spirituality and spirituality at depth. And I think that really, not only think, but I feel within every fiber of my being that the mission of what we are here to do is not to change, but to be transformed. And in fact, in that scripture in the Bible, and I loved what Baji read to us out of the Science of Mind magazine, be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind. Not be ye casually changed by the renewing of your mind, but transformed to the point where transformation is taken so seriously that if you hopped on board of that, and if you accepted, adopted, and gave yourself wholeheartedly to the mission of that let's say in a year from now, when you reflected back on who you are today, you wouldn't recognize yourself. That the pettiness that weighs you down, the stress that seems to be overbearing is no longer there because you have transformed in consciousness in such a way that that conscious change has to make a shift physically, emotionally, spiritually. And that's what we are about. And people seem to be unclear with regards to what's going to happen here. Lots of uncertainty with that. And we had a very long board retreat yesterday. Retreat's a big fancy word for a very long meeting. Very long meeting, where we decided that it was time to iron out what the seminal message behind SLCA, Spiritual Living Center of Atlanta 2.0, means. And this is what we came up with. We believe it is SLCA's responsibility to consciously lead in educating and engaging the spiritual seeker in an ever-evolving world. It is our responsibility to lead. It is your responsibility to lead in your own personal path of transformation. No one else can do that for you. When we look at ourselves as a collective, we can decide that we will wait and see what other people will do, or we can choose to lead. We can change and piecemeal things here and there, or we can jump into this divine mystery, that which is transformation, and let it do with us to the degree that we are willing to participate in that. And I've long held the idea that a singular voice, a singular personality, is a very marginalized way for you to be able to be on the path of transformation. And it can lead to a lot of pedestal standing. But when you are exposed to multi-generational, multi-faith, multi-voices, and that kind of wisdom that leads, people don't go to Yale because there's one singular professor. They go to Yale because it's an established, esteemed place of learning. And the vision for SLCA is not to come because of personality, but to become to a place, it is known for its transformational ability to teach practicality, spiritual practicality, in a way that it transforms the individual's lives. And one of the best ways that we can do that is to open ourselves up, to be available for the information, for the wisdom and the guidance that wants to come through the multitude of voices that deserve to be heard. It's foolhardy for us to think that it can only come from one channel. And so when we decide, are we going to change a little bit or are we going to transform? The decision is clear, at least for those of us in leadership, those who look at spirituality as something that is necessary for the soul's assignment. I want to transform. I want to transform by the renewing of my understanding of my place in the world and the way in which my consciousness is a part of this. And one of the ways that we transform is to begin to own all of this sensibility of separation that exists inside of us. There's really only one fallacy, and it's the belief in separation, the belief in us and them. When we look at our month's theme about communication, we have to decide mentally, how are we communicating ourselves when we see other people, when we see other countries, when we see things that are foreign to us, when we see things that we are ignorant of? What is our gut reaction? What is our knee-jerk reaction to that information? And I will be honest with you that as a species, we are all racist. There isn't just one subset of individuals who are racist. What has happened is we toss that word around a lot now, and racism simply means prejudice, discrimination, or antagonism that is directed against someone of a different race or a base of belief. And they do that because there's this false sense of superiority. Right? And so here's the uncomfortable part about racism, is that when we call people out with regards to being racist, what's one of the things that we say? You spot it, you got it. So inverted racism simply means that when I'm calling someone out on their racism, I too have that within me. Because I am fearful of the things that I don't understand. I am ignorant of, and so I become reactionary to customs and people and voices and things that I'm ignorant of. And so I want to grasp onto my own superiority because it's familiar. And the thing that holds us back from transformation is our allegiance to what is familiar. Familiarity is this fence by which we run back to time and time again. We change a little bit, right? We try new things. We make New Year's resolutions. And we have all of these great intentions. And so we move away from the fence of familiarity and we attempt the change only to, which is our nature because we are human, to fall and to stumble and to make mistakes. But the big thing about that is if I run back to the fence, if I go back to what was, then the change was temporary. And I've come back to what is comfortable. But when I make the mistake, or when I bring that issue to the light to be healed, when I own that which is racism inside of me, and I continue forward in a pathway and a due diligence and an intention to understand, then I move towards transformation. Are we willing to do that as a society, as a species? So we have racism, we have xenophobia, which is the irrational dislike or fear of people from other countries. People we haven't even met yet, and I have an irrational fear about them. And where does that come from? From the falsity and the illusion of the narrative of our news and of other people's opinions, things that we haven't even explored yet. But you see, if I break away from the fence of familiarity and I run into the mystery, if I run into the unknown, then the likelihood of what I will discover is this thing that I have an irrational fear of, I'm just like them. There's this one commonality, to be seen, to be loved, and to be heard, which is a universal thing. Chauvinism, which is another exaggerated or exasperated patriotism towards one's own gender and thinking that this gender is better. And all of these tentacles of this idea of separation are the things then that hold us back from being what it is we are designed to be as a soul. So why did you come into this incarnation, into this humanness? Is it to remain in the density of that racism? Is it to constantly call people out instead of pausing and going, okay, where is that within me? You know, the thing about a wound, the thing about not taking care of the wound properly is that when we just keep covering it up with what's convenient, with what's familiar, the wound then never gets brought to the light of day and it never has the opportunity to truly heal. If I don't address my inner allegiance to the illusion of separation, to the falsity of us and them, if I don't do anything about that, then I'm creating spiritual bypass. And I'm just making this thing convenient. And I'm doing it only when it feels easy, comfortable, familiar. But the true path of transformation, can you imagine that caterpillar going, what is going on? Boom, boom. You know, and these wings sprout out. Try it at home. Go, what is going on? Boom, boom. But the thing about the transformation is once it happens, what do you have? You have wings. You have something that lifts you above, that flies you above all of the density and all of the illusion and all of the things that have held you down. It's what you and I keep saying that we want. And so something has to move us beyond every time that we stumble to get back up and go, okay, what was that about? What's the lesson here? And continue to move forward. Instead of running to try to pacify the pain and then disappearing and then coming back when the pain is here and then disappearing and coming back when the pain is here and then disappearing. Transformation requires a steady, involved, continuous commitment to the renewing of our minds. And that's what we are here to offer, and that is here what we are trying to allow ourselves to be receptive to. And the only way that we can do that is to move into the beauty of that. And so within the container of our own being, we will either succumb to the idea of fear as a reality, of evil as a reality, of racism as a reality, or we will move ourselves continuously to the transformation of being able to see real reality with a capital R, which is the voice, which is the intelligence, which is the unified oneness of what this thing called God is here to be. And so what container, then, will we allow ourselves to play in? Will we revert back to the small r reality in believing and allowing this thing called fear? Or will we begin to move ourselves from the density and the stress? Can you imagine how stressful it must be to be a racist? So if we thought about its polarity, the word that came up in our CSL outline for us to consider was grace. From racism to gracism. And what is grace, really? Christianity defines grace as the idea that even though you are a sinner, God loves you. That's okay. I've kind of transformed from that. I haven't just changed. I've transformed from that belief because I understand grace then to be this. As our views about God shift and morph and evolve, then we understand God to be solely life itself. Source, intelligence, absolute love. And when I deny that, grace is still present. When I deny love, love is still there. That's grace. When you and I are ignorant to the laws of cause and effect, that what I think manifests, grace is still there, and we can pick right up where we left off. When I allow myself to be jealous or to be angry or to covet something that someone else has and believe in the false ideology that somehow I've been robbed of something and that life is unfair, when my mental shift comes back to the resonant understanding that all is God, grace has always been there and it allows me to come home. Grace is the allegory of the prodigal son. That even when you leave and go to the far country, you come back because all along that which is that seminal archetype of the Father or intelligence or love itself has solely been waiting. As if nothing has ever happened. That's grace. So grace is a constant. So even when we are succumbed to the illusion of us, and then even when that which is the inner racist inside of us is activated or triggered out of defense, out of fear, grace is still there. And so what is required of us is to see how committed am I to bridge my life, to move transformationally from this pathway of illusion of racism to gracism, and to use it more and more and more. When I think of grace, I cannot help but think of that hymn, Amazing Grace, and how much I had issue with that song. Because I was born and raised in fundamentalist Christian, First Assemblies of God, Beaumont, Texas, hallelujah. And the song was like sung all the time, right? And so I associated that with that. And I can only remember how much energy I expended in trying to get away from that environment as a child. And so every time I would run up against the song, I was like right back at First Assemblies of God in Beaumont, Texas. So the song would sing and I'd run out of the room. One time Penelope said, "Oh, the choir's going to sing Amazing Grace." And I went, "Ah!" It was a beautiful rendition, by the way. You know, and so that's that wounding we talk about. It's like, okay, it's not the song. It's all of the memory and the false idea I have attached to it. But the reality is if I sit and I listen and I try to understand, healing can occur. I can be transformed. And so the amazing thing about that song and what we have been guilty of as a movement, particularly in the early days, is we didn't have a lot of music to kind of go with the message. So people would take secular songs and they would change the lyrics a little bit. And they would sing them in New Thought churches, which, you know, is copyright infringement, but hey, go for it. So when we would sing, or I would hear Amazing Grace, Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. So of course they'd go, "We can't say wretch. That's awful. We've got to change that. That saved and set me free." Okay, that sounds good. Let's sing it. Even though you're singing it and you're still hearing the words wretch. And you go, "Oh, wait, okay, got to change it." Right? And so if you take a deeper dive and you go, what is this song about? What's the grace? Then you begin to understand that this was written by a man named John Newton in the 1700s. And I love this word. He was a scallywag. He was this just bull-headed young man. His mother died when he was young. His father was a sea captain. And so all of the bad habits of being at sea just infiltrated him. And he drank and he boozed and he caroused. And he was just this horrible guy. And then he defied leadership. And then he was thrown into prison on the ships. And then he was placed on a ship that was basically transporting slaves. And he began to build this hatred and anger towards slavery so much that he became involved in the slave trade. And then he had his Shaktipa, his transformation, his deliverance, his awareness of God in his form and in his fashion. Much like we read so many other people. In the Bible, it was Saul on the road to Damascus, where he has this illumination, this mystical experience, and he's no longer Saul. He has been not changed, he's been transformed into this being called Paul. Well, the same thing happened for John Newton. And in this transformation, he felt such shame for his contribution to the pain and suffering of the slaves that he spent the rest of his years trying to make amends for that. And in his latter years, he wrote several famous hymns, Amazing Grace being one of them. So the stanza that says, Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me, he was talking about himself. And he was perpetually trying to make amends for his contribution to the illusion and to the pain and the suffering of an us and them world. And when we think about that, we can own our inner wretch. It's true. It's true. Because let me tell you, if you don't own your inner wretch, it's going to pop up. And you are going to be so skilled at calling it something other than what it is. And you will create justification, just like as we do with our own racism, our own biases, our own ignorance. It's too convenient, it's too comfortable to call out everybody else when we're not calling ourselves out on it. Our mission is not to clean up somebody else's backyard. Our mission is to clean up our own. And so when we understand that that exists, it doesn't define who we are. It simply means that we've made an agreement to transform. And in our transformation, what we do is we bring all of that up. Do you remember how I've talked often about values? And God, boy, do I subscribe to this. If you don't understand what your values are, you are missing out. If I can't come up to you and say, tell me your 5 top values, and you don't have that down, there's such vagueness then that invades clarity and prevents us from the energy of transformation. And so we both have individual values, but SLCA has this value of being this leading age, conscious deliverer of spiritual tools to a waiting world, an ever-evolving, changing world. That's a value. And then do you remember the piece that I shared a couple of weeks ago that said, the quote that said, the most powerful mantra that you can speak is, I'm available. And beware, because if you say it, things are going to happen. Things are going to start to shift. Transformation is going to come and knock on your door. Right? And so when SLCA, as the collective, as leadership, as people, as we vote, as we say, okay, we're going to do this, what have we done energetically? Is we've said, I'm available. I'm available. So one fantastic person that I absolutely love here in Atlanta, her name is Mona Shai Joshi, and she is the Atlanta director for The Art of Living. The Art of Living is a worldwide organization that was founded by Sri Sri Ravi Shankar, who, next to the Dalai Lama, is probably one of the world's greatest humanitarians and spiritual influencers. And Mona works with him quite often, very close, almost like a right arm for him. He was coming. Well, actually, I asked Mona to come and to speak to you as one of our possibilities for the council, because she's just, her wisdom is incredible. And so she will be here in August. And she said, if I'm coming to your world, you have to come to mine. So I went and I took that training. I think I told you about I took the introductory training. And then she called me and she said, Sri Sri is going to be making a rare appearance in Boone, North Carolina at the Art of Living Retreat Center. And I really wish that you could come. And of course, I'm like, where am I going to fit that in? And she goes, if you come, I will do what I can to let you meet him. Cancel, cancel, cancel. Get in the car at the crack of dawn on Thursday, and I drive to Boone, North Carolina. I will just tell you, I don't know how she did it, But she navigated me through thousands of people. And I got to have a one-on-one with Sri Sri Ravi Shankar. And right before we were about to enter into this vestibule, she said, "What are you going to say to him?" And I went, "I don't know. I'm so cognizant." I mean, all these people just trying to grab at him. And she goes, "No, you need to be very intentional, David." I'm like, "Okay." And she said, "Tell him what you're doing here in Atlanta. Tell him what SLCA is doing. He loves that." His whole thing about being it is the world's largest global humanitarian organization. His whole thing is about multiculturalism and diversity coming to work together. You need to tell him that. And I said, "Okay." So I go in and I wait, and then just dry mouth. And I go in and she says, and they call him Guru Dev, and she said, "Guru Dev, this is Reverend David Ault from Spiritual Living Center of Atlanta. And I want you to hear what they're doing because it's revolutionary." And his eyes got really big, and he looked at me, and I said, But basically I told him that we as a community were moving into an unformed territory where we were looking at how do we take 21st century spirituality and be the leading edge voice for that. And he said, "My God, that is fantastic." And I believe he gave me a thumbs up and a yellow scarf. And it was amazing. And here's the thing about that. When you say, "I'm available," remember, watch out. I couldn't have fathomed that I would met someone of that stature and spoken the words Spiritual Living Center of Atlanta and have him go, "Oh my God." I got to tell him about my new school in India, and he goes, "We have an ashram in Bodh Gaya. We will help you." And I'm just like, "Oh my God." And that night, she said, "Come to the evening celebration." And he said something that night, Thursday night. Then I went, "This is why I'm here." So as he was addressing the thousands of people that were there, he said, "There is only one fallacy, one pain that holds us back as a world." And of course, everybody's thinking war or separation. And he goes, "That thing is stress." Stress. Stress is birthed from the idea that you and I must have things certain. When things must be certain, when it must be mapped out, when it must be graphed in such particularization, then you create stress because that's not the way in which the world is designed. Because there even is in science the law of uncertainty. And he goes, so our human journey is a journey of uncertainty. Now the paradox of that is that yes, there is this uncertainty, but the paradox is also is that there is one seminal knowing. And the knowing is that only love is real. If I know that only love is real, or the only thing that is there is God, then the rest can be uncertain because I'm trying to take my finite opinions and awareness and tell the infinite what to do. And he goes, so there is one word, that will be the cure for your stress. So everybody leans in. And he goes, that word is perhaps. So if I take this job and I move to this city, my life will be better. Perhaps. If I find this person and they love me back and I can get married, all things will be perfect and I'll have this fairy tale ending. Perhaps. He says, you must love the perhaps. And then you will have no more stress. And it's true. our stress. Remember, being a racist must be really stressful. Because I am trying to maintain a very rigid opinion about the world. But when I allow myself to open up to the one seminal truth that love is in charge, who am I to tell love, to tell source, to tell this intelligence how to do it? It's my job to be the conduit. And in my willingness to be able to move and to breathe in that experience, I cannot help but transform. So if you and I are unhappy, if we're just base unhappy, dissatisfied, I will guarantee you that a part of the equation that we continue to mathematically design is control. To trying to control the way that this is supposed to look, to trying to control how people are going to receive me, to try to control my image, to try to control my finances, to try to control all of these things, when if I just willingly abide by those laws of spirit that tell me it is done unto me as I believe, that there is more than enough to love my neighbor as myself. If I abide by those things and let it lead me, I will no longer keep running back to the fence of familiarity. I will have long left that. And here's the beautiful design about that. Once I let go, I will stumble, I'll get back up, I will stumble, I will get back up, I will keep moving towards a trajectory of transformation to the point that at one time, all of the things that I have characterized about myself will no longer be valid. If I bring my wound to the light, I will no longer be wounded. If I hide my wounds, I will continue to be wounded. If I label myself as inadequate, I will continue to be inadequate. But if I confess my inadequacy, if I confess my fears, by confession simply meaning bringing it to the light to be renewed and to make a new choice, then I have become available for what is waiting for me. That, the way in which it looks, will be perhaps but the foundation of it will be something beyond our comprehension, because we will have surrendered and simply said yes. And so it is. Hi, I'm David Ault, and I simply want to say thanks. Thanks for taking the time to watch our broadcast here at Spiritual Living Center of Atlanta. We have a vision, and that vision is to reawaken all to their spiritual magnificence. And one of the ways that we are able to do that is through this very medium of broadcasting. So if you got anything out of this, if you felt in any way inspired, or if something spoke to you directly, then I extend an invitation to you to become a part of our family by donating. And there are many ways in order for you to be able to do that. One is to simply go to our website at slca.com, and there you will find all different kinds of prompts that will help you support what it is that we are doing here in Atlanta. One way is to become a pledger. That means that you decide on a monthly basis that you are going to help us with this vision. Another way is to donate through our management system called Fellowship One, another through PayPal, and another even easier way is on your cell phone. You can do what's called text to tithe, and that number is 404-796-7030. Again, thank you so much for your support, and I invite you to come back weekly to see what it is that we're up to. Blessings.